Have you ever heard of a horse who was a priest, owned a marble stable, an ivory manger, and even had his own house with furniture and slaves? This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of Incitatus, the beloved horse of the Roman Emperor Caligula. And let me tell you, this horse's story is way more than just an example of a rich guy spoiling his pet. It's a tale of political satire, pure audacity, and a middle finger to the entire Roman establishment. So, who was Caligula? Well, his name alone sends shivers down the spines of history buffs. He was the third Roman emperor, ruling for just under 4 years, from 37 to 41 AD. His reign started with promise but quickly descended into what historians describe as a mix of cruelty, extravagance, and outright madness. He declared himself a living god, wasted a fortune on lavish projects, and had a reputation for executing people on a whim. But of all his bizarre behaviors, his obsession with his horse, Incitatus, is perhaps the most famous, and honestly, the most fascinating. Incitatus, whose name means swift or at full gallop, was a magnificent Spanish stallion. Caligula adored this horse. According to ancient historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, Caligula showered Incitatus with luxuries that most Roman citizens could only dream of. The horse wore a collar of precious jewels and purple blankets, which was the color reserved for the emperor himself. He was fed oats mixed with gold flakes. His stable was made of marble, his manger of ivory, and he had a dedicated team of slaves to attend to his every need. But Caligula didn't stop there. He elevated Incitatus to a level that was completely unheard of. The horse was appointed as a priest in Caligula's own cult. Imagine that. A horse leading religious ceremonies. On the night before races, Caligula would impose silence on the entire neighborhood by military order, just so Incitatus could get a good night's sleep without being disturbed. Soldiers were sent to enforce this quiet zone. It's both hilarious and terrifying to think about. Now you might be thinking, okay, Caligula was clearly insane, and many historians would agree with you. His actions seem like the ravings of a madman. But what if there was more to it? What if this wasn't just madness, but a calculated, brilliant form of political mockery? Let's dive into that, because this is where the story gets really interesting. To understand Caligula's actions, we need to understand his relationship with the Roman Senate. By the time Caligula came to power, the Senate, which had once been the heart of the Roman Republic, had lost most of its real authority. The emperors held all the true power. Yet the senators, who came from old aristocratic families, still clung to their prestige and traditions. They saw themselves as the rightful guardians of Rome, even if they were largely powerless. Caligula, on the other hand, despised them. He saw them as hypocritical, sycophantic, and ultimately useless. So, how do you show an entire political body that you think they're a complete joke? You can't just say it. That's too simple. You have to be creative. And Caligula was nothing if not creative. Think about it. By giving his horse a life of luxury, far beyond what any senator could afford, Caligula was sending a clear message. He was saying, "My horse is more important, more valuable, and more deserving of respect than any of you." The jewel-studded collars, the marble stable. These weren't just gifts for a pet, they were political statements. Every lavish detail was a direct insult to the senatorial class, a way of rubbing their noses in their own irrelevance. But the ultimate troll move, the absolute peak of his political satire, was his alleged plan to make Incitatus a consul. The consulship was the highest elected office in the Roman Republic. It was a position of immense prestige, once held by Rome's greatest leaders. For Caligula to even suggest that his horse could do the job was the most profound insult imaginable. He was essentially saying that the office of consul had become so meaningless, so devoid of real power, that even a horse could do it. Or perhaps that a horse would do a better job than the men currently filling those roles. Historians debate whether Caligula was actually serious about this plan. Some believe he announced it as a genuine intention, while others think it was just a threat he used to mock and humiliate the senators. Suetonius, one of our main sources, presents it as a definite plan. Whether he meant to go through with it or not, the message was crystal clear. The political machinery of Rome had become a farce, and he was the director of the absurd play. This act was pure political theatre. Imagine being a senator in that room. You've dedicated your life to Roman politics, you come from a long line of distinguished leaders, and the emperor stands before you and says he's going to make his horse your colleague. The humiliation would have been off the charts. It was a power move designed to strip them of their dignity and show everyone in Rome who was truly in charge. Caligula wasn't just ruling Rome, he was rewriting the rules of reality itself, and in his reality, a horse could be a political leader. This narrative also symbolizes a much larger theme: the death of the Roman Republic and its values. The Republic was built on ideals of shared governance, civic duty, and respect for political institutions. The emperor, in theory, was supposed to be the first citizen, ruling in partnership with the Senate. Caligula shattered that illusion. His actions demonstrated that the old republican values were dead. Power was no longer rooted in tradition or merit, but in the arbitrary will of one man. Incitatus, in this context, becomes a symbol of this decay. The horse didn't earn his position through skill or service. He was elevated simply because the emperor willed it. He was a living, breathing monument to the absurdity of absolute power. When an emperor can make his horse a priest and threaten to make him a consul, it shows that all the traditional structures of power have crumbled. There are no checks, no balances, only the emperor's whim. This story has resonated throughout history for a reason. It's not just a funny anecdote about a crazy emperor. It's a timeless, cautionary tale about power, corruption, and the erosion of political norms. The story of Incitatus has been used for centuries as a metaphor for incompetent or undeserving people being placed in high office. Whenever a leader appoints a clearly unqualified crony to a powerful position, you'll hear echoes of Caligula and his horse. So, was Caligula just a mad tyrant, or was he a master of political satire? The truth is probably somewhere in between. He was likely a deeply disturbed and paranoid individual, but he was also intelligent and cunning. He understood power, and he knew how to use spectacle and humiliation as weapons. His treatment of Incitatus wasn't just the eccentric behavior of a pet owner. It was a calculated strategy to degrade his political rivals and consolidate his own absolute authority. He held up a mirror to the Roman elite and forced them to see their own powerlessness. The reflection they saw was a horse, dressed in purple and jewels, living a life of unimaginable luxury, and on the verge of becoming one of the most powerful men in Rome. It was a brutal, bizarre, and, frankly, brilliant insult. In 41 AD, Caligula's reign came to a violent end. He was assassinated by officers of his own Praetorian Guard, who had grown tired of his erratic behavior and constant insults. The conspiracy reportedly included senators who he had personally humiliated. What happened to Incitatus after his master's death? The historical record isn't entirely clear. The next emperor, Claudius, is said to have been more sensible. He reportedly removed the horse's lavish appointments, cut his budget, and retired him from his priestly duties. Incitatus was allowed to live out the rest of his days in peace, but his brief, glittering career in Roman high society was over. The story of Caligula and Incitatus serves as a powerful reminder that history is often stranger, funnier, and more terrifying than fiction. It shows us how a single individual, armed with absolute power and a twisted sense of humor, can turn the world upside down. So the next time you hear about political absurdity, remember Incitatus, the horse who, for a brief moment in time, was a mirror reflecting the madness of an empire and its emperor. He remains one of history's most unforgettable symbols of when power goes completely off the rails. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as wild as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the craziest moments in history. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was Caligula a madman or a genius satirist? I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next video.